Got a problem with a diagnostic trouble code. It's not showing up as a check engine light, but it is showing up when I run diagnostics. It's B1380-17, and it has to do with the oil reset switch. But I've done some research, and the clock springs are prone to failing in these trucks. So I decided to go ahead and do a preemptive change, given this truck is 11 years old, 96,000 miles on it. And what I'm understanding is that these clock springs can start to crack and have some continuity issues, changing voltage or causing voltage spikes. So I'm going to go ahead and replace it in this truck and see if I can't clear that B1380-17. The problem with these clock springs is as they degrade, it can cause problems with your supplemental restraint system, your other buttons, volume buttons, cruise control buttons. If the SRS system is tripped, and you don't have diagnostic tools to reset it, you might have to go to the Ford dealership to get them to get rid of that SRS light. So in this case, it's good to get ahead of it, and that's what I'm going to do in this video. Before starting this project, you want to make sure that the steering is straight, the wheels are perfectly straight, everything's pointing straight ahead. The steering wheel is at a 12 o'clock position, because that's a starting point for the new clock spring, which comes with a locking tab to make sure that this thing doesn't rotate as you're installing it. This will be pulled out after you install the clock spring to make sure that everything's going to be lined up when you put the steering wheel back on. First thing I'm going to do is disconnect the ground on the battery and let it sit for about 30 minutes to discharge the airbag. So when I'm taking it off, there's no concern about it exploding in my face. Now that the battery's been disconnected for 30 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and pull the airbag. And you may have already seen how to do this, but there are 3 holes where this actually snaps in, and they're rods, and they're spring-loaded rods that hold the airbag in. I bought myself some rod, and I cut it down. This is about the right size, and I've already pushed in on 2 sides. I had to hunt for the spring, and you'll feel metal contact, and then you'll push it, and you'll actually see the airbag pop out. So I've got this side and this side done. I just got to do the one on the bottom, and then this should come off without any problem. See if I can show it. Okay, I was trying to show how that thing pops out, but it took both my hands to push that lower spring up. It is quite a bit of pressure, but you can see now it's loose. And I can disconnect the wiring to remove the horn pad and integrated airbag and put it somewhere safe. Disconnecting it electrically starts with the horn. You can see there's a little tab here. You just push it in, and it pulls off of this connector right here. And then the airbag elements, you need to squeeze. Let me see if I can show you. Squeeze here and pull up. And I'm going to remove the other one off camera so the airbag doesn't fall in my lap. Removing the wheel should be pretty straightforward. I got a T50 Torx bolt here. I'm going to use a bit on that I've got and loosen that up. And I think the steering wheel comes off relatively easily. My old 10th gen, it took a steering wheel puller to get it off, but I think this one comes off a little more easily. As I suspected, it's loose, and once the bolt's off, it's going to come right off. You can see that it's all lined up. You've got a mark right here, and since I'm going to put it straight up and down again, I think there's a little mark on the shaft that it goes on. You'll know that it's lined up, but I've got the steering wheel straight up and down, so it shouldn't be a problem. Now I'm going to remove the steering wheel, but I've got to make sure that this one electrical connector is carefully removed. I'm not so concerned about the clock spring where that is attached in. What I'm concerned about is damaging the connector to the steering wheel. So as I was pulling the steering wheel, I also pulled the tab down. I'll show it to you after this image here, but I did get it loose, and I just need to feed those connectors through so I don't pull that out as well, which is also part of the clock spring. Here's a little tab I was referring to. You want to push that down to release it and gently pull it out. And now I've got the clock spring in place, and you can see how this thing rotates by itself. That's why that locking mechanism needs to be left in there in the new one to make sure it's properly lined up. I guess everybody may or may not know this, but if you put this in without this in the proper turns, when you do finally turn your steering wheel and you don't have this centered, then you can actually damage and pull the ribbon free, and then you got a whole world of hurt there going on as well. I like what Ford did going to the 12th gen. They got rid of requiring you to remove all the different pieces. Like on my 10th gen F-150, I have to remove the column shifter to get these plastic pieces off. Here it's pretty simple. We're just going to apply these tabs up to get this upper section off. Just snap that a little bit, but it's still okay. Now here for the bottom piece of plastic, I've got 3 6mm screws. Actually, that might be 5.5. Let me check. Yep, these are 5.5. So you'll need a 5.5mm socket to get to these last 3 screws that hold all the plastic on. And actually, you don't need to take it completely off. You just need to get yourself access to the clock spring. And now I've got, looks like 3 more Torx head screws that need to be removed. And these are T10. Now I'm going to pull it out and keep this lined up because I want to make sure that if the other one is not does not correct this, I've got the old one that can go back perfectly. There is one more electrical connector down here that needs to be removed. I'm going to pull that straight down. And now I think it should come out. And there we are, voila. And it's still lined up. A couple points now. You can see the 2 pins that are on the clock spring that rotate at the 3 and 9 o'clock positions that are going to line up with these 2 holes. Also, you can see there's an electrical connector here that the clock spring goes into, and I'm going to put a little dielectric grease on here. I've seen other people replacing it, and I could tell they had some corrosion. I want to make sure that no corrosion builds up on that connector. Old clock spring next to the new clock spring. You can see that they're identical. Of course, this one looks like it's seen a few better days, dirty, and just got some discoloration. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and put some dielectric grease on these pins in multiple locations, including up here where the main connector goes, and then I can install it. Here we go with the reinstallation. And I need to make sure that I've got these pins on the bottom lined up perfectly. I'll use the holes to make sure it's lined up where the screws go back in. I was a little nervous putting this in so I don't bend up any of the pins. And what you have to do is line up some pins up here, one here, one here. Yeah, and that's it. And then once that's lined up, then you'll do a press and you can feel it actually snap into place, lightly snap. And so it's all lined up. I can put the Torx screws back in. Locking pin's been removed, and you still have to be careful because this thing can still turn, so you don't want it to turn while you have the steering wheel off. But I do have this locked into the steering column, and now I can begin to put the steering wheel back on. Steering wheel's back on, and I've started the bolt. One thing I want to point out is that you do not put a dielectric grease on the airbag connectors. Anything with the yellow connector should not have dielectric grease. I found out that that's a big no-no for the SRS system, so just make sure you make a note of that. I'm going to put a little dielectric grease on the horn button, and I'm going to torque this to 40 foot-pounds. And voila, it's done. So now I need to reconnect the battery and test everything and run diagnostic trouble codes, and hopefully that clock spring is what was my problem. I'm using my blue driver linked in the description to check diagnostic trouble codes to see if the issue's fixed. Changing the clock spring cleared all the codes, so we're in good shape now. I had to do a few key cycles to get it to work properly. It took a little bit of time for me to do key on, key off, engine running, engine not running. I also had to do the oil life reset, so I had to go to settings, I had to go to vehicle, then to oil life reset, and I had to reset the oil several times. I did it to 100%. The oil is pretty fresh for me, so that's why I'm setting it to 90%. But I had to do that several times for the computer to recognize all the functions, and now it's running perfectly. So that was a successful repair. I hope that helps you out. Don't forget, I like thumbs up, and I'll see you next time on Driving Intelligence.